Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, guys, this is one of my favorite spaces right here. And that is to welcome our guests because I know for certain that they're coming with a couple of things I deem very, very precious and very expensive. Time. What a precious commodity given to each and every one of us. 24 hours. No excuses, guys. What you do and how you value that precious commodity will tell me a lot about you. I can learn about you in about 5 seconds about how you value time. And so I want to invite you guys to learn the power of time. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful creator, man. It created this beautiful, passionate, excited, wise individual that is before us. Tammy, I cannot wait. And I want to thank you, first of all, and honor you for coming and sharing these precious, precious commodity with us. And I thank you so much and welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
It is my passion and pleasure to be here. Just within seconds upon meeting you, I was like, this is going to be amazing. So I'm so happy to be here. I almost never do podcasts this late, but I just feel the energy buzzing. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for accepting and thank you for the lateness. And as I said on the onset, I am honored that you allowed me to have some of your evening time because I know how precious those downtimes are. And one of my customs here at Threads is to ask that person that is before us, how do you serve mankind? And I usually ask this question because it's twofold. It's for you as well, but also for the audience. I want to make them aware that this lifespan span that we are here, it's not just about yourself. It's about others. We have a twofold journey on this planet, self and the independent and the interdependent journey. My question to you is, how do you serve mankind?
Well, that's so deep. Well, we were speaking about trauma earlier, or you were, and I was getting so excited because trauma is like my work. So I'd say the biggest part of what I do for women is to help them heal their inner child with all the traumas that come with the first 5 years of life. Usually they come to me because they're having difficulty either in their marriage or they're looking for love and they haven't been able to find a healthy relationship. So they really come to me because they've tried all the other options, all the other therapies, and it really hasn't gotten to the root cause of their issue. And so when they come to me, first we identify the pattern, and then we go back into the childhood to heal that little girl within them. Because most of the time I work with women, we look to heal that little girl within her. And yeah, that's where we start.
That is the way to do it because all of our problems, all of it begins in that area when we were young. Another custom, that's what I do with Threads of Enlightenment, Tammy, is that I had some insights as a young man that a lot of my problems started when I was a kid. And so one of the customs that I do, because here at Threads of Enlightenment, is as human beings, one of the very first spaces that we reside or spend time for a few years is the family. Now, at this unit right there, we have these two individuals, mom and dad, that are traumatized for whatever and however they are. We have, some of us have siblings and so forth, but in all cases, we're all strangers. Mom and dad is strangers. I'm a stranger. Our being is just entered into this package. And we are now going to learn some things right here. We're going to learn, they're going to import and impact and deposit all of those wonderful words, data into you and I. What was your family unit like?
Oh gosh, my family unit is the reason why I'm here doing my work today. So I had a pretty traumatic childhood. I grew up in a very controlled, legalistic religious house, which came with a lot of fear-based thinking, which is do exactly what I say to do, or else you're going to get my wrath. And so I was trained by this system, and I lived in a house that was very violent. So my father was very aggressive, very violent, very scary. And also within my siblings, there was physical violence in my house every day. And that was just normal for me. So normal that when I went out into the world, I had a brutal awakening, because I realized that other people didn't operate like that, like they did in my house. And so I had to adjust myself. It wasn't considered okay to just go ahead and go over to slap someone when I didn't like what they were doing. Like that was so normal for me. And so, yeah, it was a crazy upbringing. And then about age 11, freshly 11, my parents sit us down and they tell us that my dad was really sick. He was dying of AIDS. And it was this big secret that they had kept my whole life, because they found out when I was 1.5. 2. When I was 2, they found out that my dad had AIDS, and it was a month later he passed away. And it left me very, very confused, because on one hand, I loved my father. He was my dad. But on the other hand, he was so scary to me that I had this relief when he died. And then because of the relief, I had all this shame, because I felt guilty that I felt the relief. So I led my teenage years very angry and bitter at God. And I say it in quotes because the idea I had of God was very different than what I believe the source is now. Now that I don't have that fear-based premise of the divine, So, but for me, I was very, very angry. I went through these very low cycles where, I considered taking my life. I felt so trapped in the pain that so for me, there were years, I'd say about 19, where I kind of learned how to cope with it without actually dealing with it. And then when I became a wife and a mom, that's when all my triggers started sounding, all started rising up, and I almost just couldn't even function, because everything from the past that hadn't been dealt with, all that pain just was everywhere. It was running my system. And so I just reached a place where if I did not handle it, I couldn't see myself being a decent mom or a decent wife. Like I just couldn't. So that's what took me on my journey of starting my healing process. But the healing remedies we have to, I would say back 20 years ago, talk therapy, things like this, don't really get to the root cause. You're kind of just talking about the problems over and over again and not really finding peace. And so for me, it wasn't until I started doing the inner child healing, going back, neutralizing my traumas, and dealing with that little girl within me, that I started to change and transform. Because as a new mom, I just perpetuated the system, the program that had been downloaded into me, So that's where it started.
I mean, what was your relationship to others, even before you got married in your teenage years, to others? Now that Dad had left, you had this input from him, violent piece. He talked about slapping, the death, the pain, the shame. All of that, this cauldron of trauma is residing within this young woman. How did she relate to others? We know, as you were discussing, what it was doing to her. How was she doing and dealing with others outside of her? What did that look like?
It wasn't very pretty. I had so many sabotaging behaviors with friendship, with everyone. It was just, I didn't have a smooth, decent relationship with anyone long term. You can't when you have that much turmoil within you, because every relationship is a reflection of your relationship with you.
Which is help.
So, so it didn't go well. I could put on a mask for a period of time, but it didn't last long. So I had all sorts of sabotaging behavior. When what I found through the trauma work was I had one command that was basically running my entire life. And for those of you who don't know, a command is a negative belief that is so deeply ingrained because it was imprinted right at the beginning of your life that it's basically running the program. And for me, that belief was, I'm unlovable. And it was, if you think about a belief like that one, you can't receive love from another person because you don't believe that that's possible, right? Because you're unlovable. So I had to sabotage all those behaviors because anytime, or those relationships, because anytime someone would tell me that they love me, now they're a liar because I'm not lovable. So that was the big one for me, that when I found it, it was like the gold. It was like, oh, that makes so much sense, right?
Yeah. You shall, as I said, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And again, that revelation, or that nugget, is whatever that truth is when it relates to that individual. And that truth is manifested. We call those things revelation. That revelation of that thing that was there, when that is revealed, that's when stuff starts to happen, because the work begins there, because now you have to learn how to let go of that and how to create a new belief system in there. So here's this girl. She has all of this stuff going. She doesn't believe the word of someone when they say that they love you and you got married. So talk to me about this now, because here's this guy, I love you, and that little baseline thing inside you saying, oh, he's a liar. And the next thing you know, I do. How did this manifest, Tammy? How did that come about?
Well, first of all, I got married before my now husband. The first time I was married, I was 21, and it was this man at the church at that time, a church I was involved with. And he was what the Bible would describe as a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? He using the church to kind of manipulate.
The church.
Yes. So he, was a lot like my dad. My dad was like a womanizer, cheated on my mom, went after all the things. He was totally that, but really good with his words, very manipulative. He would use the Bible to completely manipulate the conversation, right? And he was like, no, he was not my type at all. He was not attractive. I did not want to be with him at all, but somehow I allowed him to manipulate me to marry him. And now that I look back, it's so crazy, but it makes sense with that command I had, right? Because I just felt like no one's going to love me. So I just got to take what comes along. That was my process. And the whole time we were only married like a year and a half, but the entire time he cheated on me. He never worked. I totally took care of him. Like, he was awful to me, so mean. Yet I was so sad when he was like, bye, I don't love you. I don't want to be with you. I was like so sad, right? Because of my system. I didn't believe in divorce at that time, as part of that. And so now that I look back, it was such a great learning experience. But I met my now husband a year later, right? Now we've been together 18 years, but still broken when I married my now husband. And he's so perfect for me, but I did so much to sabotage. Like, our relationship was so toxic for so long because I was so toxic. I just feel so bad for the way I treated him. But truly, both my husband and I were toxic. We both lost our fathers when we were really young. So we had similar traumas, but we had different ways of expressing. For me, when I got triggered, I'd turn into this, scary monster. I was loud, and he would hide, get small, leave. So we would just trigger each other. Like, when he got small and hide and got quiet, I felt abandoned. So I'd react, and then he'd react and I'd react. So we just had this cycle, this toxic cycle for so many years, and you can't see it before you start going inward. You cannot see it. Like, I had no idea that it was me, right? And then when I started healing the little girl within me, she could see with, I describe it to my clients, it's like a new prescription that I was able to, as you have your glasses, I got my new prescription and I swap out all the pain and the unforgiveness and the bitterness, and I get to put on these new lenses of clarity and peace and joy, and it's just a new prescription with all the things that I really, really want.
Yeah. That new prescription is a new perspective that I tell people. It's how you look at all of us have problems. Everyone. No one is immune to it. The principle is it rains on the just and the unjust. Now, how those two people handle and look at that situation will dictate how they deal with that situation. And I remember teaching my kids, learn to be grateful. Gratitude in all situations changes the perspective of the situation.
Oh, yeah.
So you're able to navigate easy. If you begin to become worry and trouble and so forth, it just grows and so forth. So here's this woman now, Rao, and your husband he retreats. What was it, Tammy, that caused you? Because you alluded to the fact that you had to go in, and that's where the answers are located. And I know it's usually several things. It leads up to it. It's years in the making and all of those things. But then I always tell people it's like Bolero. It starts slow, and then it comes up. And next thing you know, there's this cymbal crashing, and all the things start happening as it climaxes in the song in Bolero. What was it in your life, Tammy, that caused that climax for you to begin that journey inward, so that you can begin? Because you talk about the inner child. How did you come to that knowledge that you had to go to speak to that inner child? I mean, where did that come from? What started that inner journey?
Like you said, there's so many things incrementally, but when I was early in my motherhood journey, seeing, okay, we have patterns, right? So what I've noticed with people is they either take on, if they haven't healed, they either take on the patterns if you were raised by your parents, by either the mom or the dad. Well, because I had resistance towards my dad, I had unforgiveness towards him, I took on him, right? So now in my family of origin, I'm the one trying to control, manipulate, and with these fear-based tactics. So when I saw that pattern being duplicated in me, that's what shook me to my core and told me, like, I refused to take all of my trauma and pain and dump it on my kids the way it was for me, because my dad had this horrific life, terrible life, and all of his pain became my pain on the day of conception. But I didn't know that, right? And so it was early on in my motherhood journey that I saw me, the monster. When I saw the reflection in the mirror, I saw the monster, and it was my father in me. And so that was the catalyst for me. Now, as far as going deeper and deeper, that's just the kind of person I am. I'm so curious, right, about human beings, why we are the way that we are. Can we change ourselves? I wanted to know why I had so many blocks. I wanted to know how that system and pattern worked. And so I started to study humans, like our psychology, our conscious and our subconscious mind, how it works. And the more I studied, the more curious I got, and the more I started to implement new things. So I just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper. But what I found worked for me was when my imagination, was when I started to work with myself in my imagination, those young parts of me. And so I just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Because I want the audience to see and have a glimpse that it's not. You have to excavate. You have to dig. We call it the onion layers, where you peel away one layer to the other and so forth. Because the answer is there, and when you move all those layers, you get to that truth, as you said, that foundation truth that you looked and you said, "Oh, this was the one that was guiding me all through my life." And when you notice that, then it's illuminated, and you're able to gain wisdom, insight, and it changes you, changes your life, your behavior, everything. And it's only through the process of digging. And that process, as benign as we talking about it, it's one messy situation as it comes, because we fluctuate. It's never a linear growth is never a linear thing. It's back and forth, down, all that. But you heard what Tammy said. Curiosity, one of the most powerful things available to the human being. The other is the imagination. The imagination is another tool afforded to us, because when we began to imagine, I grew up in the church, and I believe a lot of things start there, because it tells us, Tammy, I was a pastor, so I know some of the things that those guys do in the church. And I remember reading this thing. It says, in the beginning, God created heaven and the earth. He had to imagine this thing to put it together. So it had to originate in his imagination. So the imagination is one of the first playgrounds by which things are formulated, thoughts are given birth, and worlds are formed. And that's how one creates, is in the imagination. As Tammy said, she began to imagine things and create her world there. And now she's living from that space. So here you are, began to investigate you saw yourself in the mirror, you saw Dad. I know exactly what you're talking about, because that was the same thing that inspired me on my journey. Was I saw myself in representation of my nemesis, my father, my grandfather, and it scared the heck out of me, and I needed to make some adjustment, and I began to pursue it vigorously, as you did. As you were beginning to pursue and desire change, and with your curiosity guiding you, what began to happen to you, Tammy, as you began to excavate? What did you begin to notice in you?
Most powerful thing that I found is the fact that we create all of it. The same way, us being made in the image of the Creator and creation. And like you said, we create in the same way. And it starts with a thought. Well, even before the thought comes the belief. I believe this is what Jesus was talking about with the sowing of the seeds. The seeds is the belief planted, boop, in the subconscious mind. And then over the course of the lifetime, it's watered by this event. Oh, it's true. These kids rejected me on the playground. Oh, it's true. My dad, hated me. Oh, it's true, right? The seed gets watered throughout the lifetime, and then roots go deep and deep and deep. Out comes the plant. Then finally the fruit, right? And so the fruit of my beliefs is how I saw how creation works. And from there, I was like, I created what I have now, whether I knew it or not, I created it. And then from here, that means that I am so powerful that I get to create it anew in the way I wish to. And so once you know the formula to creation, then you could do it on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
so
absolutely.
That was the big thing for me, is when I just saw the system, how we create it. It just kind of gave me that aha of like, okay, for one, I'm so powerful. Look at all I created. Some of it I like, most of it I don't. And then the stuff I don't like you said, I get to shift it. I get to look at it and shift the stuff that just doesn't work for me anymore. But the biggest piece for me that had the biggest difference was the fact I realized I hated myself so deeply. And when I saw you at the beginning of our call and you're like kissing yourself and talking about how much you love yourself, and I'm like, I'm not there yet. But if you see me compared to who I was 20 years ago, you would be like the people that knew me back, they know there's no comparison, right? Because I have taken all this knowledge and I've applied it, and I've said, this is who I choose to be now from this place, right? And someday I'm going to be like you. I'm going to be smooching myself all over. And I'm going to be saying, look at this beautiful creation that I sculpted with my own hands, the clay, right? I am the potter. I'm also the clay, and I'm every other. I'm the water. I'm all the parts of it. And I just gave away all of my power for so long because I was the victim. And I was like, you all did this to me. And I refused to see that I was all the parts, and I just didn't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. We are some powerful beings. It's just people don't understand. Look, I tell people when they come to me and they engage in conversation, I say, look at your life. You have created it on your default mode without you not even knowing. But you have created that. Now, think of what you can create with the knowledge that you want to change. You're going to be, you're going to be frustrated of stuff because when you're on the default program, you don't notice, you don't care. But you're going to want to get frustrated on this because it's not your expectation, but that's not how creation is. And I try to put it to them this way. Psalm says, a day is like 1,000 years before the Lord. A day. So I tell people we're looking at it as dog years, and when we're comparing it in man years, dog years and man years. For one day is like 1,000 years. So according to Genesis, it took him 7,000 years to create the earth in our time. 7,000 years. So that is some time. So now when you and I are creating, we want it the McDonald's way, but you can't. As a creator. You must be meticulous. You must be specific. He said, let there be light. There was light. Let there be. And you have to be very specific, but you have to know what you want in order for that manifestation to be specific. So that takes time. And so because you don't know, it will take time for you to know. And so your world, your creation world will take time because you are gaining insight as to what you want. And so you must learn to be patient with yourself, the creator, to create what you want and allow the time for it to manifest. And so the reason and how I got to the place where I'm able to kiss myself is this. There is nothing like me. I am an endangered species. I am one of a kind. When I die, there are industries that are making billions of dollars on how unique every one of us are. The police could not solve a crime because of that, how unique we are. Because if all of us had the same fingerprint, they would never solve a crime. Industries are built on our uniqueness. And because of that, oh my God, I love me. I just love me because I couldn't stand me for years. I was ashamed. If you knew where I came from, if you knew, I couldn't say anything like that. I couldn't walk past a mirror and look at that guy. And when I started my journey on learning to love myself, it was very painful. And I grew to love me and all of his faults and all of his imperfection, all of it. I just love him because I know what he aspires to do and where he has come from. And I've learned to be patient with him and give him the time to make the adjustment because he's some beautiful little creature. And I just love this guy. And it took some time to get there. But trust me, you will get there because you'll understand that, wait a minute, there's nothing like me on this planet and never will be. And so because of that, I ought to treat myself differently because no one is going to treat me like I am going to treat me. My husband, my wife, my kids, nobody. And so I have to love me deeper than my husband will ever love me or my wife or anyone. Why? Because I am that special. And I am a creator just like God because he gave me the authority to create just like him. So I am a creator. All of us are creators. In fact, the Bible calls us, he says, you are little gods, but you will die like mere men because we don't understand who we are. And so the process of the journey, Tammy, is to help us to remember who we are. And that's what you are embarking on. And in order for us to do that, we have to deal with that inner child because that inner child was traumatized. And because of that trauma, it has skewed that inner child's belief, it has skewed much. And so in the journey that's uncovered, and because that individual has been traumatized with so much trauma, it's going to take a long time. This is a journey that is uncovering, and we will always uncover trauma. There's
Mhm.
little things that are hidden, hiding in little walls. But as we get into the rooms that are within us, we will, as the spring cleaning goes, when you lift things up, you're like, wow, I didn't know that was there. And you'll see things manifest when kids do things and when your husband do things and when strangers do things. And you will say things like, oh, I thought I handled that already, but you didn't. You just started. So yeah. So here you are. You're all in this wonderful journey and you are learning about the self. You're learning. Talk to me as you talked about how it, your reflection to you started learning. How did people now, as you began to learn about you, how did people begin to witness and reflect to you the changes that they saw within you as you began to change?
Everything in my world changed. Everyone, the way I've perceived, like you said, perceiving, the way I perceived everything changed. So no relationship stayed the same. There were some people that exited, many.
Yeah.
You know, if you're on this journey, many are going to exit because you have to realize that you're no longer on the same frequency as those people. And that's very uncomfortable for people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Birds
Yeah.
of a feather flock together, and so we tend to hang around with people around the same frequency as us. So as you raise your frequency, because you're cutting off those lower vibrations or lower frequency things like unforgiveness and bitterness and
Yeah.
powerlessness, as you rise up, all your relationships have to change. And so initially, my husband was uncomfortable with my change, which is normal, right? I tell all my
Mm-hmm.
clients this. It is normal for him to be uncomfortable because you're switching up the system. My husband, all of a sudden, he didn't have his fight buddy. Who was he going to fight with?
Yeah.
She's not arguing back. She's not accusing me. She's not blaming me. That shifts the whole dynamic of everything. All of a sudden, I see things in a different light. So initially, he was uncomfortable. But after he saw that the change wasn't wearing off, that it was sticking, and the peace, the tremendous peace I had, the acceptance of myself, he wanted a piece of that. He's like, I want that stuff you're drinking. I don't know what it is, but I want some of that juice.
Yeah.
And so he transformed just by being in my presence.
Yeah.
I say this humbly. Now that I'm saying this for the first time, I say this with so much humility, but you cause others to heal just by being in your presence when you've done the inner work. And that's what I noticed happened with me. Like even my mom will say, even though she's still very much in that old fear-based system, but not to the extent she was. And she even says to me, I've learned so much from you. And I didn't even notice that I was doing that for people. But
Yeah.
that's just, I think, the natural thing that happens is we start to affect those
Mm-hmm.
around us upward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it is called pruning the branches.
Yes.
When, as you begin to move higher, as you prune the branches, you're cutting all the dead pieces off. Why? Because the tree will bear much fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And as it bears fruit, it's able to feed people. All those that in proximity of that tree is able to grab and partake of that. And that tree is there, just minding its own business, doing its thing. And yet it's able to feed.
Creating some juicy fruit. I used to say, I want so much fruit on my tree that my branches can barely hold it all up.
There it is. There you go. And trust me, I think you have much more to do because I think the timing is what's where we're entering into. Your fruit will be picked as the need to feed others is going to increase. And here you
Mm-hmm.
are, as you see the changes happening within the family and those in close proximity to you. Now, because it's going to start doing things inside of you as you began to expand, as you began to grow. Stagnation, I tell people, stagnation is an enemy of personal growth. No one wants to stay stagnant once you become aware and you're seeing movement. As you began to see and experience and expand, what began to happen to you even more? Because for me, Tam, I got more hungry. I just wanted more. And it was fascinating as I gained more, I wanted more. What was happening to you as an individual as you began to assimilate all of these knowledge and the wisdom and the growth that was happening in your life, and you're witnessing the effect of your husband, those that are close to you, being affected by your personal growth?
I was the same as you. I am. I can't get enough of it, you know. I'm always reading a book. My biggest teacher is the reason why I think that we become servants is because that's just the next step on the journey. Once you have embodied this work, this inner work, it's almost, you almost can't even help it because of the magnetism, right? People are just magnetized to you and they're like, hey, how do I get this stuff? Like, give me some of this stuff. And so I eat it for breakfast, lunch, dinner, every snack in between. Like, I am so committed to my inner work that I get excited about each layer of the onion. I'm like, ooh, another onion peel. When I find when I get triggered by something, for instance, I get excited. I don't get mad at myself and say, you bad girl, you got triggered again. No, I said, ooh, more stuff to find, because like you said, there is no end to this journey. It's an eternal one.
Yeah.
And so once you get through one layer, you're going to find another and another. And I don't think that we'll ever get to the center of that daggone onion.
Yeah.
I think that it's constant. And I feel like the second we've gotten to what feels like the core of that onion, we transition up out of our meat suit, right? And so we just get to embrace the journey that it's ever unfolding, that we are eternal and our journey of expansion, it won't ever end. And love that part, because when you do, then there's no place to get to. Like, some people are like, I don't want to be here, I want to be there. Like, when I first start working with these women and they're like, they want so badly to be on the healed side, but I'm like, you never feel 100% healed.
Yeah.
You take one step and then another, but we're not like fast forwarding our journey, because this is the good stuff.
I want to circle back to someplace because I know in most of us, this aspect of self-love is critical when it comes to personal growth and experiencing a certain degree of peace within life and self-acceptance. You have those that are having all kinds of problems right here. Millions of men, women, girls, young girls, low self-esteem. And I tell people, when you suffer from low self-esteem and all these things, someone will come and build up your esteem. And whoever that individual is, you could be in big trouble unless you learn how to do it yourself. I want to circle back a little. Tammy, talk to us. Here's this girl. You talk about not loving yourself, and if people knew you. Bring me back to that aspect of yourself. When you began to discover that you did not love yourself, what did you see? And what did you do to begin to heal and begin the journey of falling in love with you?
Well, I found it, digging into my belief system, I found that I perceived that my father despised me because I was a lot like him, and he despised himself, and so I believe that was just a bunch of shame. I believe that I felt shame because for my personality, I had a big personality. I say things how it is. I'm very upfront, and I felt like my entire life, because that was so different and I was so in your face, a very strong cup of coffee, if you will. I felt shameful about who I was and my personal, unique personality. So when I found that, and I realized that was just a belief that had been passed down from my father to me, because it was something he felt about himself, tremendous shame. His whole family had just this spirit of shame, right? They all died very young for tragic reasons. My dad was the last to go of his 3 siblings at 39. And so I just saw this lineage, the curse or the trauma that we receive from 7 generations back, right? I started to look at that and realize that I didn't even really create that. It was actually something I inherited. And when I saw that, like all the other beliefs, I realized that that's my gift to heal my lineage. So it was shame that I found.
What did you do to help you through to overcome the shame? Because shame was mine that I had to overcome, in the fact that I grew up in a church and all the things that I was programmed in the church, and looked at my life and saw my life is not what I was taught of in the church. It was there's this dichotomy of the church, and my life brought much shame, and I had to go inside and deal with it. And I remember mine was one day when I came out of my divorce and I turned my back on God and I said to him, I am going to become the worst sinner you ever saw. He must have laughed at me. He thought this guy is absolutely nuts. And I said, yeah, I'm going to become the worst you ever saw on this planet because you were, and I turned my back on God. I remember when I went into my party phase and whatever, and one night I said, I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to deal with this. And I remember sitting down and talking, having a conversation with myself on shame. And from that conversation, when I came up and I got up from that conversation, I actually invited shame. I said, come and sit down, let's have a conversation. And I began to talk to this entity that has been a part of my life for a pretty long time. And at the end of that conversation, I thank him for being there, being a part of my life. And I told it, I said, I don't need you anymore. I don't need to have that as a part of my being. And thank you for the lessons that you have taught me. And that was the last time I ever encountered that. And I remember getting up and moving from that day forward. And every time, because we know when it comes, and I sense when it come back, and I said, thank you again. I don't, again, as I said, I don't need you. I hope you're doing well. And I just move on. How did you deal with your shame? And because someone out there is listening and they're in the midst of their battle, and they may have been in church. It's usually stuff like that. They've done things that is against their inner core, and there's this shame sitting there. Walk them through as to how you dealt with it, and maybe they can identify. I spoke to mine too. Maybe they can identify with mine as well. But speak to yours as how you dealt with yours.
Well, I think yours is beautiful. It's something referred to often as like parts work, like dealing with the different parts of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so shame comes from, beliefs. Oh, I did something wrong or bad. Well, who said it's bad or wrong? Well, my dad did, or the Bible did, or whatnot. But it's like we're all going to have missteps, or what the Bible refers to as sin. We're all sin, missing the mark, like we're shooting for this thing, but we miss the mark. We're all going to have that. So it's like,
yeah.
Would you like to? So forgiveness is such a huge part of the healing journey. Forgiveness is just breaking up with the negative past. It's saying, hey, this thing happened. Okay, I don't need to identify this as bad or good. It was something that happened. I did it. Did it serve me? Not so much, but it happened. And now I'm releasing it. Like the shame part of it is just someone else's voice in your head, right?
Yes.
So you're carrying around these beliefs that, like I said, don't even belong to you. 95% of our beliefs that we hold, unless we've done the inner work, 95% of them we inherited. So we get to look at those, right? And we get to let go of the ones that no longer serve us. Now, when it comes to the things that we should or shouldn't have done, I think it's just a conversation of forgiveness, whether it's something that someone did to you or that you did to you or you did to someone else. It's like you have to break up with that because the shame is going to eat you alive. It anchors you into these lower the powerlessness energies. You have to break up with them. So you have to have forgiveness for all those versions of you that pre-existed within you. And you got to say, I know you did the best you could with what you had, and I forgive you, right?
And that's the
It's a
key,
forgiveness
guys.
topic. Yeah.
That's the key. Forgiveness. Forgiving yourself is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. And it is one of the most rewarding things you'll ever do. Once you forgive yourself, you will be free. And I did that at that table, got up, and I've never had that incident or that issue again in my life. I did that in my 30s. I'm now 60 and 63 and nothing. So it works. And as I said, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Whatever your truth is in your situation, get to find that. And you do that by digging. So here you are, Tammy. Talk to us. Give me a situation where you have a couple comes to you, or a woman comes to you, and she's broken. And I know you have your 4-step process, and I want you to briefly just glance on that. Don't go into detail, just whet their appetite, as they say. And when they come into your space, you can go into much more detail. But using your 4-step process, how did you walk someone through? And I know what it'll do to you, but what did it do to them when they saw the truth as you walk them through the process? And what was the reward for that marriage, if you will?
So the first pillar is healing the trauma, like neutralizing the trauma. So it's really identifying the patterns that are not working for you, following those back to the traumas that they are connected to from the childhood, healing the trauma wounds. The second pillar is creating the new identity, because when you realize that the old one was created from the traumas, you then realize that you have that freed up space to create the new one. So it's identifying the new you. And then the third is identifying that new relationship that you get to create based on your new identity. And then the fourth pillar is it's aligning to your life purpose. It's birthing your life purpose from the recreation, the rebirth of you, the rebirth of her. And that's the quickest way I could describe it.
That is perfect.
But it's really it's neutralizing the stuff that's really tied to her greatest pain points in her life, working on her relationship with herself. Rarely ever, we don't even get till the third pillar to the actual relationship, because I believe just by her going inward, everything starts aligning from there, because she sees who she is and she's rebirthed from that place. So
yeah, that's powerful. Guys, we're going to put all of her stuff together for you to get to her. And that's the key. All of us are traumatized, especially when it comes to relationship, marriages, and all these different things. And here we have someone who has all of this wisdom and knowledge embodied in her and housed in her. We want you guys to have access to her. And so we're going to provide all of that information so you can. And the purpose of that is so that you can change your life, man. None of us want you to be in pain. We don't want to see you there. Why? Because we were there. We don't want all of these low energies to encompass and control your thoughts, your life, because we were there. We know what it feels like, and we do not want you to be there. And we are on the other side, and we're still moving forward. And so we want you to come and walk and become who you are. And so we're going to provide everything that you can get access to her, get into her world, tap into her brain, get everything that you can. Bring yourself and change your life and change your trajectory, change your family, change your world. Tammy, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment and spending your precious evening with us here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a beautiful conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.